Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse. Thanks for joining me today. In this video, we're going to discuss how in a world with no boundaries, traditional values are radical. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video today is to really give encouragement to a lot of people right now who are being tested and tried in one way or another. And we shouldn't really be surprised by this, because if you're aware of the biblical calendar on the days which we are currently in, these are the days of awe leading up to Yom Kippur, right? So very heavy spiritual times for people, particularly of Bible belief. In this world, over the past several decades, we have seen the steady and progressive destruction of the family, the adoption en masse of communist ideology, and of implementation of Marxist methodology in getting there. And so the very slow Fabian socialist totalitarian tiptoe has been going more and more and more at an accelerated pace in recent days. Why is this? When a culture has no boundaries on accepted and permissive behavior, and when a culture is so intoxicated and overdosed on postmodernism, there are no objective right or wrongs. There's no fence. And we tend to think of a fence or a boundary as a negative thing, like it's stopping something or it's keeping something out. But I think what we're seeing right now in a culture that's grasping for straws at some type of hope for endurance into the future, the boundaries are not a negative thing, and standard prescribed acceptable social norms, they protect what is good more than keeping out and limiting people in many, many ways. So the founding fathers, of course, gave us a republic form of government. We have a constitutional republic, which is very different, obviously, than a democracy. They are not the same thing. Founding fathers detested democracy because they recognized that it eventually devolved into totalitarianism via the mob. And so when you have a representative republic, there are certain non-negotiables, and those non-negotiables, from our founder's standpoint, were heavily influenced by Judeo-Christian thought and from a scriptural standpoint. Now, the founders, of course, had various different proclivities and persuasions as to how they read scripture, because they had liberty of conscience. This was a function of the Reformation and of literacy en masse and availability of the scriptures that was a direct function of the Gutenberg press and of the proliferation of the printing press in general. People were able to arm themselves with information, and because they had information, they had agency. What has happened over the past several decades, though, is that with this abundance of information and an abundance of opinion, there has been precious little responsibility for action that comes with knowledge. And so as we've seen cultures and nations, particularly in the West, devolve into lawlessness and into I'm okay, you're okay, anything goes, everything goes, we've now gotten to the point where things that were considered offenses and psychological pathology worthy of locking people up for fear of being danger to themselves or others, that's considered something laudable and something that's not only permissible, but that is recommended now even to our children in school. I think, though, in the future, what we're going to see is a countercultural reformation of sorts, where the new renaissance that we can face is one of recognizing, we see this actually with the Italian elections and with the election of many so-called right-wing politicians who really, if you evaluate their positions, are nothing more than traditional family values. And we are seeing, I think people have absolutely enough of this, because there's only so much lunacy that can be embraced before there's no integrity. When you look at, even from a biological standpoint, this principle of integrity and of boundaries being things that keep good things protected instead of just keeping bad stuff out, there's a positive to the negative. Even the cell, for instance, from a basic biological standpoint, if that cell membrane loses its integrity, then the contents of the cell are going to spill out via the osmotic gradient. So even science, just trust the science. Let's trust the science when it comes to the cell membrane, but nothing else when it comes from Dr. Fauci or anybody who is employed actively by DC. We know that boundaries keep the good things protected. And in a world where there have been precious few boundaries, in a world that's OD'd on postmodernism, this next, I think, cycle of history is going to determine what we hold dear as a people and what our values are as a culture, and really where we're going to hold and what we're going to pass on to the next generation. Are our children going to have anything to inherit except for stuff, money, and debt? And my hope is that in this time, that as people are reflecting and that we're transitioning into fall and into a new season, that we're also reflective on what it means to be the caretaker of a legacy, the legacy of the Enlightenment. Are we willing to give it up? Are we willing to completely abandon the things that allowed us to get here? It's interesting because you consider the lunacy of the past 20 years, for sure. The things that we've been told to embrace by the media, the large and legacy media, the things that we've been told to embrace, the things that we've been told to just go along to get along with. Now, these are the things that are creating so much chaos in the midst that we're becoming unable to perpetuate our culture and our society. Whether it's the birth rate, whether it's the dissolution of the family, whatever it is, I believe that the next countercultural revolution is going to be towards traditionalism. Now, there comes with this a series of caveats that we have to be aware of. One of the things that I've seen on my end of the equation here as a content creator and in this YouTube world, when people get to a level of despair, they want to cry out for a political leader and a political messiah to save them. And that is not a good place to be. Because the people who overcorrect away from socialism and away from Marxism, they have to be careful to define who they are first, and to define their values. Because if you don't have a very strong sense of your values, you'll be captive to any winds of prevailing ideology that come by and feel good for the moment. And so that means that people who feel disempowered are going to crave power, and they're going to crave the strong man, and they're going to crave being part of the groupthink of the winning team, whatever it is. And I would encourage us all to really do some soul searching in this time and to evaluate where your own boundaries are with permissible and acceptable behavior, and what are your values. That's the thing. Boundaries are a function of values. If I cannot definitively and objectively say this is wrong because, and give a solid reason for it, then I haven't really fleshed it out in my own life. And if you can't flesh this out, and you can't develop the ideas on why you hold the values that you do and on what informs your day-to-day behavior, you are not a caretaker of that legacy. I would not be a caretaker of that legacy. We have to wrestle with these things. Work out your faith, wrestle with it, and figure it out, what your values are and why you have them. More than just a reaction against something, we need to be pro something and for something, and be able to give a justification why we hold traditional values, what it is about these values that have led to the proliferation of the best of humanity, and why it is that when we suppress these values and we call these woe to them that call evil good and good evil, what is it about the nature of mankind that whenever he takes the deviant and the wicked and the heinous and elevates it as something, as an ideal, why is it, why do you think it is that cultures seem to fall apart whenever certain things fall into place, deemed as progressive and deemed as modern? Why is that the case? In human history, it's interesting. Winston Churchill was asked, what should a person study? And he said, study history, study history, study history. In it lie all the secrets of statecraft. The people who understand the future are the ones who are students of history. And I'm very blessed because on this channel, so many of you are fellow students of history, and you know that the reason why we have these principles, these traditional values, and why we are inheritors and bearers of these values from the revolution, the values of the Enlightenment, is because these values are time-tested. Ultimately, they're biblical values. Choose for yourself, judges. And this comes from the scriptures. It comes from the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. Self-determination, limitation of government, separation of powers. These things are what create a milieu and an environment that give human beings the best possible chance at thriving within boundaries. And once we work out what are our boundaries, I think it's going to be much easier for us to give a defense not only of our belief, but of our faith, and also of this far and no farther. In order for us to stop the advance of tyranny in any age, we have to define ourselves first in terms of a positive. I am this because. Not against, I'm not this, I am this. These are my values. What I'm seeing is incompatible with value X. I'm going to do Y about it. So I think, friends, in this little chat, I wanted to give you guys some encouragement, but also encourage people who are going to be the bearers of the new counterculture. If we're going to be able to keep the republic that we have, in whatever way, shape, or form or fashion that it is in the future. We have to first define our values in terms of who we are, why we hold them, and what the historical precedent is for these values. Instead of defining ourselves in terms of a not, we have to set our boundaries in terms of who we are. So I hope that video was helpful for you today. If you did enjoy the video, I hope you'll subscribe to me here on YouTube, Patriot Nurse. You can also support me on Patreon, subscribe to our cryptocurrency, and PayPal. I got links below. You get 2 opportunities to train with me in person for medical preparedness over the next year. Milwaukee, Wisconsin is in 3 weeks, I think. Got a few spots left for that. And then also Keller, Texas, the Dallas area. That's going to be in December. Lord willing, I'm going to be unveiling the 2023 schedule for next year. Knoxville, Tennessee. Planning, Lord willing, to go to Idaho Falls in February. I'm going to be launching that on the website soon, so keep a lookout for that. Friends, I think it's very important in times like what we're seeing, particularly in elections, and honestly, just in the geopolitical upheaval, the season of uncertainty that we're seeing in Europe. This will not stop in Europe. This is going to, I think, spread, and the tendency is going to be towards decoupling and decentralization of power. I think the era of globalism is gone, and I think more and more people are going to be contracting and bringing their interests and their visions back home, and that's going to usher in a lot of different changes economically. It's going to increase the cost of labor. It's going to increase the cost of pretty much everything, supplies and commodities wise, because a less efficient logistics delivery means more expensive everything. So it's going to bring in some really challenging times, and times like these are historically very easily exploited by strongmen and by political people who take captive the emotions of the masses and funnel them for their own nefarious purposes. But we have to be defined based on our principles in these days to come. I hope it was helpful for y'all. For now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off, and I'll see y'all later.